Hi, third graders. This is Mrs. Oyster, and today I'm going to read to you chapter 3 from Wind in the Willows called The Open Road. Before we begin, I want to go over a couple of literary terms, which is vocabulary related to reading, that I would like you to learn as we go through this domain. So, first, the first two are dialogue and narration. So, dialogue and narration are two ways that authors might tell a story. Dialogue is when characters are actually speaking to each other. So, it's the actual words characters are speaking to each other. And you'll know it's dialogue because they will have quotation marks. Narration is the rest. It's the actual telling of the story. So it's the description, it's telling what happens, but it's not characters actually speaking to each other. So you will see a mix of both in Wind in the Willows. Perspective, we talked a little bit about yesterday. Perspective is like a point of view, it's the eyes that we are seeing the story through. So far, Mole is the perspective that we're experiencing the story through. We also talked yesterday about themes. A theme is a big or broad idea that comes up many times over and over throughout a story. So, the theme that we talked about yesterday was friendship. And friendship is showing kindness to someone, being friendly with someone. We talked about examples like when Rat rescued Mole when the boat capsized, or when Rat took Mole on a boat ride and packed him a picnic lunch. Those are examples of the theme of friendship. And friendship goes hand in hand with loyalty. Loyalty is when someone is loyal or stays faithful to someone else. You may know the story Charlotte's Web. And in that story, Charlotte, the spider, is loyal to Wilbur the pig. So she's showing loyalty. Now, we have two new ones today, responsibility and irresponsibility, that you are going to listen for. Responsibility is when someone takes care of the things that someone is supposed to take care of. So it's doing the right thing, doing your job, when you're doing good work, being trusted, and being dependable. Irresponsibility is the opposite. Irresponsibility is not being responsible. It's when you're not really thinking carefully about your actions or when you're not considering the consequences of your actions. So today, I want you to listen carefully for the themes of friendship, loyalty, responsibility, and irresponsibility. Ready, said the mole suddenly one bright summer morning. I want to ask you a favor. The rat was sitting on the riverbank singing a little song called Duck's Ditty that he had just composed. All along the backwater, through the rushes tall, ducks are a dabbling, up tails all. Ducks' tails, drakes' tails, yellow feet a quiver, yellow bills all out of sight, busy in the river. Everyone for what he likes, we like to be. Heads down, tails up, dabbling free. I don't know if I like that song, Rat, said the mole cautiously. Nor do the ducks, replied the rat. Ratty, began the mole again, what I wanted to ask was, won't you take me to call on Mr. Toad? I've heard so much about him. Why, certainly, said the good-natured rat. Get the boat out. It's never the wrong time to call on Toad. He must be a very nice animal, observed the mole as he got into the boat and took the sculls. He is indeed the best of animals, replied Rat, as they set off to visit the distinguished Mr. Toad. So before we go to the next slide, I'd like you to take a look at the words on this page. You will notice that there is dialogue and narration. So up here, let me grab my pointer. Up here where you see the quotation marks, this is dialogue. I don't know if I like that song, Rat, said the mole cautiously. So these words right here, these are actual words that Mole is saying, so it's dialogue. Then here where there's words like began the mole again, said the good-natured rat, observed the mole as he got into the boat. Those are not words that someone said. Those are storytelling sentences. And so that would be called narration. Before long, as they were rounding a bend in the river, they came in sight of an elegant old red brick house with well-kept lawns reaching down to the water's edge. There's Toad Hall, said the rat, and that creek on the left where the notice board says private leads to his boathouse, where we'll leave the boat. The stables are over there to the right. That's the banqueting hall you're looking at now. Toad is rich, you know. They glided up the creek and into the shadow of a large boathouse. There they disembarked and went in search of Toad. They found Toad resting in a wicker garden chair with a large map spread out on his knees. "Hooray!" he cried, jumping up on seeing them. "This is splendid!" He shook the paws of both of them warmly. "I was just going to send a boat down the river for you, Ratty. I need your help," said Toad. "It's about your rowing, I suppose," said the Rat. "Oh, pooh! Boating," interrupted the Toad. "I've given that up. Now come with me, dear friends. I have something to show you." Now, students, you might recall from yesterday's read aloud that they described Toad as someone who gets really, really into something and then he gets over it. And then he gets into something new and then he gets over it. And so you'll notice that in yesterday's read aloud, he was really into boating. That's where they saw him out in the river. And all of a sudden now he says, "I've given that up." So let's see what he's into now. He led the way to the stable yard, and there they saw a gypsy caravan, shining with newness and painted a canary yellow and green. "There you are!" cried the Toad. "There's real life for you. The open road, the dusty highway. This is the very finest cart of its sort. Come inside and take a look." The Mole was tremendously excited and followed him eagerly up the steps and into the caravan. The Rat refused to follow. It was indeed very compact and comfortable. There were sleeping bunks, a little table that folded up, a cooking stove, a bird cage with a bird in it, and a variety of pots and pans. "All complete," said the Toad triumphantly, pulling open a cupboard to reveal a variety of tasty treats. "We are ready to set off this afternoon." "I beg your pardon," said the Rat slowly, "but did I overhear you say something about 'we' and 'set off' and 'this afternoon'?" "Now, Ratty," said Toad, "don't begin talking in that sniffy sort of way. I can't manage without you. You surely don't mean to stick to your dull old river all your life." "I'm not coming," said the Rat, "and I am going to stick to my old river. And what's more, Mole's going to stick to me. Aren't you, Mole?" "Of course I am," said the Mole, loyally. "All the same, it sounds as if it might have been fun," he added, wistfully. The Rat saw that the Mole was disappointed. He hated disappointing people. Toad was watching both of them closely. "Come along in and have some lunch," he said diplomatically, "and we'll talk it over. We needn't decide anything in a hurry." During luncheon, Toad spoke enthusiastically of the joys of the open road, so much so that the Mole could hardly sit still in his chair. Before long, unable to disappoint his friends, the Rat had agreed to go. When they were ready, Toad led his companions to the paddock to capture the old gray horse. For his part, the old gray horse did not want to be captured. Eventually, though, the horse was caught and harnessed, and they set off. It was a golden afternoon. The smell of the dust they kicked up was rich and satisfying. Late in the evening, they drew up on a remote common, turned the horse loose to graze, and ate their simple supper sitting on the grass. At last, they turned into their little bunks in the cart. Toad sleepily said, "Well, good night, you fellows. This is the real life for a gentleman." After so much open air, the Toad slept very soundly, and no amount of shaking could rouse him next morning. So the Mole and Rat set to work. The Rat saw to the horse and lit a fire, while the Mole trudged off to the nearest village for milk and eggs. The hard work had all been done by the time Toad appeared. They had a pleasant ramble that day along narrow by-lanes and camped as before on a common. This time the two guests made sure that Toad did his fair share of the work. As a result, when the time came for starting next morning, Toad was no longer singing the praises of the open road. Their way lay, as before, along narrow country lanes, and it was not till the afternoon that they encountered their first main road. There, disaster struck. For as they strolled and chatted, from far behind them an unfamiliar sound could be heard. Glancing back, they saw a small cloud of dust advancing on them. From out of the dust a faint pop pop sounded. Ignoring this strange vision, they turned to resume their conversation. Then, in an instant, the peaceful scene was changed. A blast of wind and a whirl of sound caused them to jump out of the road. The pop pop sound rang out once more. As the sound rang out, they glimpsed a magnificent motor car with its pilot hugging the wheel. This splendid vehicle flung a cloud of dust in their direction and then was gone. At the sight and sound of this vehicle, the old gray horse reared and backed towards a ditch. Before long, the canary yellow and green colored cart lay on its side. The Rat danced up and down in the road. "You villains!" he shouted, shaking both fists. While Rat was shaking his fist, the Toad sat straight down in the middle of the dusty road and murmured, "Pup, pup." For his part, the mole was busy trying to quiet the horse. Then he went to look at the cart on its side in the ditch. The rat came to help him, but to no avail. "Hi, Toad!" they cried. "Come and help us." The toad did not reply, so they went to see what was the matter. They found him in a sort of trance, his eyes still fixed on the dusty road. The rat shook him. "Are you coming to help us, Toad?" he demanded. "Wonderful sight," murmured Toad. "The real way to travel." "Oh, stop being a fool, Toad," cried the mole. "And to think I never knew," continued the toad. "But now that I do, what dust clouds shall soon spring up behind me." "What are we going to do with him?" asked the mole of the rat. "Nothing at all," replied the rat firmly. "You see, I know him too well. He is now possessed. Never mind him. Let's go and see what there is to be done about the cart." A careful inspection showed them that the cart was in a hopeless state. The rat knotted the horse's reins over his back and took him by the head, carrying the birdcage in the other hand. "Come on," he said grimly to the mole. "It's 5 or 6 miles to the nearest town, and we shall just have to walk." "But what about Toad?" asked the mole anxiously. "Oh, bother Toad," said the rat. "I've done with him." They had not proceeded very far on their way, however, when there was a pattering of feet behind them, and Toad caught them up. "Now look here, Toad," said the rat sharply. "As soon as we get to the town, you'll have to go straight to the police station to lodge a complaint, and then you'll have to make arrangements to have the cart mended." "Police station? Complaint?" murmured Toad. "Me complain of that heavenly vision that has saved me? Mend the cart! I've done with carts forever." The rat turned from him in despair. "You see," he said to the mole, addressing him across Toad's head, "he's quite hopeless." On reaching the town, they left the horse at a stable, and gave what directions they could about the cart. They went home by train and escorted Toad to his house. Then they got out their boat from the boathouse and set off for home. The following evening, the mole was sitting on the bank fishing, when the rat, who had been chatting to friends, came strolling along to find him. "Heard the news?" he said. Toad went up to town and ordered a large and very expensive motor car. All right, that is the end of this chapter. So for tomorrow, I'd like you to think about examples of the themes we talked about. What examples did you hear of the theme of friendship? What examples did you hear of responsibility? And what examples did you hear of irresponsibility? And we will talk about them at our meet tomorrow.